On a stormy afternoon in rural Kansas, a well-worn crop duster plane makes an unexpected landing beside a muddy backroad. What happens next will leave you in awe. Welcome to HAI Stories, where everyday heroes take flight. When 62-year-old farmer and pilot Earl Thompson spotted a stranded car through the pouring rain, he didn't think twice. Behind the wheel was Mrs. Eleanor Walker, an elderly woman trying to reach her son's military promotion ceremony, one she couldn't afford to miss. With no cell signal, no working roads, and a storm cutting off all communication, Earl made a decision that would change both their lives. By sunrise, Earl's old yellow Cessna would be flying toward restricted military airspace, only to be intercepted by two F-16 fighter jets. But why? And how did a humble crop duster earn a military escort and an invitation to an event reserved for generals? Stay with us. This is a true tale of courage, kindness, and a flight no one will ever forget. Earl Thompson had never chased fame or fortune. At 62, he was content with his quiet life in the heart of Kansas, dusting crops at sunrise in his old yellow Cessna, the same one he bought secondhand nearly 20 years ago. His hands were calloused, his boots worn from seasons in the field, but his heart still held the same wonder he felt as a boy watching jets roar across the sky. Flying was Earl's first love. His father, a World War II veteran, had taught him to fly when he was just 14. Back then, Earl dreamed of joining the U.S. Air Force, soaring above the clouds in fighter jets, just like his heroes. But when his father passed unexpectedly, duty called him home. The family farm needed him more than the skies did. Still, every time an F-16 thundered overhead, Earl would look up from his fields and smile. The dream never left him. It just took a different shape. He may not have worn a uniform, but in his own way, he served, feeding families, helping neighbors, and keeping watch over the land he loved. What he didn't know was that fate hadn't forgotten his dream. Late one August afternoon, as thick storm clouds rolled across the horizon, Earl was finishing what he thought would be his last pass over the cornfields. Thunder cracked in the distance, and the smell of rain hung heavy in the air. He was just about to head back to the hangar when something caught his eye, a flicker of white near an old gravel road. A car sat pulled over, hazard lights barely visible through the downpour, and beside it stood a woman waving what looked like a scarf or sweater. Instinct took over. Earl circled once, squinting through the sheets of rain, then angled his Cessna down toward a nearby pasture. The landing was rough, wet grass and deep ruts, but he'd landed in worse. As he jogged toward the car, the wind lashed at his jacket and rain soaked through his cap. The woman was elderly, maybe in her 70s, but she stood tall, clutching her cardigan with trembling hands. "Are you all right, ma'am?" Earl called out. She offered a weak smile. "My GPS sent me this way," the engine gave out. "I'm trying to reach the Air Force Base. My son's receiving his first star this evening." Earl blinked. "A general's star?" She nodded. "I promised I'd be there." He looked at the dark sky. The base was nearly 80 miles north, and the storm had already knocked out radio towers and power lines across the valley. There'd be no tow truck, no phone call, no way forward. But Earl didn't hesitate. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you dry. We'll figure this out." He didn't know her name, didn't know her son's rank. But in that moment, Earl made a choice, the kind that defines a person. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. The storm passed by dawn, leaving the Kansas sky a crisp, brilliant blue. Earl was already out by the hangar, checking every bolt and fuel line on his yellow Cessna with the kind of care that only comes from decades of flying. Nearby, Eleanor stood wrapped in his wife's old wool coat, holding a cup of coffee, eyes filled with quiet hope. "You treat that plane like it's family," she said with a smile. Earl chuckled. "She's earned it. Never let me down." By 6:30 a.m., they were airborne, skimming low over the rolling farmland. Earl flew like he always did, just above the treetops, following the contours of the land. Eleanor pointed out old barns and church steeples below, her voice calm but excited. They were only 20 minutes from a private airstrip near the base when the radio hissed to life. "Unknown aircraft heading northbound into restricted airspace. Identify yourself immediately." Earl's heart skipped. He keyed the mic, "Cedar Valley Crop Duster, humanitarian flight." Before he could finish, a blur streaked past his left wing, an F-16, then another on his right. He'd seen them in the sky all his life, but never this close. The radio crackled again. Cessna in 2917T, you are ordered to change course immediately. Eleanor leaned forward, calm as ever. This is Eleanor Walker. My son is General Michael Walker. Is he throwing one of his fits again? There was a pause. Then, Mom, what happened next felt like a dream. The F-16s couldn't match Earl's slow speed, but they flanked him carefully, an impromptu honor escort leading a humble farmer's plane towards something far greater than either of them could have imagined. Earl's hands tightened around the yoke as the military base came into view, a long stretch of tarmac lined with crisp, white buildings and American flags fluttering in the morning breeze. But it wasn't the airfield that made his heart race, it was the crowd. Lined up at the edge of the runway stood an honor guard, officers in full dress uniforms, a brass band at the ready. And at the very center, tall and composed in his decorated blues, stood General Michael Walker, eyes fixed on the small yellow Cessna approaching from the sky. Earl swallowed hard. He'd never landed on a military base before, never flown with fighter jets as wingmen. And now, he was about to touch down in front of some of the highest-ranking men and women in the United States Air Force. The wheels kissed the runway so smoothly, it was as if the plane knew the moment was sacred. As they rolled to a stop, Earl exhaled slowly, glancing over at Eleanor. Her hands trembled just a little. You got me here, she whispered. I promised, Earl replied softly. The cockpit door swung open, and for a moment, time seemed to pause. General Walker stepped forward, his polished shoes echoing on the pavement. Then, like any son, he ran the last few steps and embraced his mother, holding her tight. We thought something happened to you, he said, voice thick with emotion. She smiled through tears. Earl made sure I didn't miss your big day. Michael turned to the farmer in dusty boots and a sun-bleached cap. Sir, I don't know what to say. Earl shrugged. Did what anybody ought to do. One of the F-16 pilots joined them, helmet under his arm. General, this man flew that plane like he'd been part of the squadron for years. Smooth as silk. The crowd chuckled, and Earl's face flushed. That day, they seated him with honor. He stood among generals and heroes, his yellow crop duster parked beside jets worth millions. But no one questioned his place there, because sometimes true service doesn't come with medals. It comes with heart. Earl Thompson never sought attention. He didn't wear a uniform or salute the flag from a base, but he honored it every day in his own quiet way, by tending the land, by helping his neighbors, and, on one unforgettable morning, by putting someone else's need ahead of his own. That day at the airfield wasn't just about a dramatic landing or fighter jets in formation. It was about what happens when ordinary people act with extraordinary kindness. When someone like Earl, with no expectation of reward, simply asks, "What do you need?" instead of "What's in it for me?" In a world that often moves too fast, Earl reminded us to slow down and do what's right. Back home, his yellow Cessna still rests in the old wooden hangar, wings dusted with Kansas soil. His grandchildren love hearing the story of the day Grandpa flew with F-16s. And on the wall above his fireplace hangs a photo, one crop duster, 2 fighter jets, and a moment when character, not rank, earned the salute. At HAI Stories, we believe in celebrating real-life heroes like Earl, people whose choices leave a legacy not just in headlines, but in hearts. If this story touched you, let us know in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a moment where a small act of kindness made all the difference? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to HAI Stories, and ring the bell so you never miss another tale of courage, compassion, and unexpected heroism. Because sometimes, the most powerful wings are the ones no one sees coming.